Welcome to the Motivitystate Podcast, the space where we dive into mobility, movement, biomechanics, neurology, and much, much more. Hello. It's another day, another episode of the Motivitystate Podcast. Today, my guest is David Gray. Some of you might know him, some of you might not, but I'll let him introduce himself in just a moment. Just as usual, I want to share the story of how I know the guests. In our case, I believe we connected over Instagram through the AIM community, Anatomy Motion, through Gary Ward, and then I've been following his work for probably a couple of years now, and he has actually exploded his following and his success stories and everything programs over the last couple of years. Apart from that, he also, I guess, learned from some people I also learned from. But without further ado, David, tell us about your personal story. I mean, who are you? What's your background, and all things related.
Yeah, I'll try and make it brief, Rado. Thank you very much for having me on. I'm looking forward to the chat. I am kind of a rehab specialist, I would say, based in Ireland. It kind of falls between, I basically just work with movement more often than not. There's a very little bit of manual therapy sprinkled in here and there when I feel like I need it, but I think 99% of it is movement, and that's been probably accelerated because of the COVID situation and the online stuff and the ability to just share some of my work online. And everyone, like, there's a lot of people, I suppose, on Instagram saying that they work with movement, but then in the privacy of their own clinic, they're still doing a lot of hands-on work and actually not as much movement as they claim they are. But that's definitely not the case for me, because the programs are delivered online, obviously, so I can't rub someone through the screen. So yeah, just work with a variety of people. A lot of athletes, a lot of very high level athletes, but then all the way down to just someone who's in pain and wants to feel a little bit better. And as you said there's been a big variety of systems, I suppose, that I've kind of taken a lot of influence from over the years. And some of them wouldn't be my biggest fans, because they don't tend to like me very much, because I don't I rarely take what the system is saying as gospel. I'm just trying to figure out some of the principles behind it and then tweak it and play with it, not for the sake of variety, but just for the sake of trying to find what works best for me. So loads of different systems, anything that I could get my hands on over the years, and it's been a long journey for me to be where I am now, and working with some really cool people, and being able to kind of mentor and help some other therapists and coaches along the way. And yeah, that's kind of it. It's been an interesting few years in terms of trying to, especially on the business side of it, I suppose. And I heard a phrase recently where someone said running a business is like jumping out of an airplane and trying to figure out how to make a parachute on the way down. So that's certainly what it's felt like over the last couple of years. So yeah, I hope that's some kind of an introduction. But yeah, it's just been an interesting couple of years, and lots of learning, and still making mistakes, but still trying to learn as I go along.
Yeah, and actually, the what you're saying, I wanna touch 3 points on what you said. First is about working with movement. Although you're like a physio, and like a lot of your colleagues, especially like it's a global thing. It's not just in Ireland or Bulgaria, but it's all over. They put clients when they go with pain. They put clients in some like a vacuum environment, and then they do those tests which have been around for decades, and like rotations, whatever, like angles and stuff. And then but they don't connect the dots, and they just specifically work on a local issue, and most of the times it's a global problem,
Hmm.
which manifests in like a local tissue or local joint or whatever it is. So that's one, and that's probably why what you do resonates with me, because I'm the same way. I don't have any formal medical education, but since I've learned from some of the people you've also learned, and others, um, all of them are not necessarily medical professionals, but they teach movement, which actually works, and they connect the dots, and it works for people, which is, I guess, the end goal.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, Provide solutions.
Yeah, yeah.
And
So the
mhm.
movement side of it. Sorry to interrupt. The only thing that we know what that works is movement at the end of the day, and it doesn't have to be perfect movement or anything like that. But you will see someone struggling when they're just not even getting out for a walk every day or something like that. So the only thing that we actually know works, we don't know what movement is the best for a person, but we do know we can't survive without movement. So it does make sense to me that we would try and prescribe movement to people and encourage movement and encourage good movement, hopefully, as well.
Yeah, and this is another thing which you mentioned, that who decides what good and bad movement is. I mean, it's very specific to the person and to the goals. Of course, if he's an athlete, he might not need end range strength, for example. I mean,
Mhm.
it might be specific, a very specific mobility or whatever loading that they need for the sport. Or if it's like a regular Joe who goes out for a walk and nothing else, means I mean, just train that so he enjoys like life. I mean, he doesn't have to become like do like 10 reps in like a Nordic glute ham raise or whatever it is, like those popular exercises nowadays that which everyone's bragging about. And another thing about what you said, not being dogmatic and not following the gospel of systems, I believe I'm also the same way, because it's important for me to understand about the principles which it teaches, because once it helps you with your assessment and finding out what the issue is, and then once you know the principles, the exercises are already there. I mean, it's free. They're free on the internet. I mean, anyone can do it, but it's a thought process that you follow in order to get to the solution.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the thought process. That's always critical thinking is what I think we are missing. And there's a lot of recipes like on the internet there, the recipe for your knee pain, the recipe for your back pain, and even in the medical world, I think they're teaching. And they kind of need to teach in that way because it needs to be standardized in some way where like a lot of people that fall under a similar umbrella are going to approach things in a similar way. But unfortunately, the body is very complex. Fortunately and unfortunately, the body, the nervous
Mhm.
system, the brain is very complex, and it doesn't really agree or transcribe to the recipe system. And what the reason why you have, like, both of our pain might be very, very, very similar. We both might have the exact same injury or quite similar injury, but our nervous systems might deal with it in a very different way. And also the reason why it developed in the first place might be because of, for you it might be you haven't slept very well in a month, and you go for a walk, and even just walking on an uneven ground doesn't feel so good. For me, my knee pain might be, well, I actually hurt my ankle 6 months ago, and now that's not really able to take load and distribute load around the system. So my knee is overworking as a result. And then there's a million other things on top of that. And even me saying those two examples are quite reductionist because that's not even how movement is organized or how pain actually even works. We don't even understand how it works very well, but we know it's very rarely one thing. It's usually a, a multitude of factors that kind of lead up to something. So to say that, for a lot of people will just say, you have pain here, you need to do this exercise, and I need to do this manual therapy because that tissue is tight. Doesn't I don't think it really respects the complexity. It's very ignorant, I think, and it's disrespectful to the complexity of the human being, I think.
Yeah, and I think that part of the problem is that when people deal with pain, and when actually our colleagues or medical professionals now deal with pain, that they specialize, but then they forget that it's a whole system, and it's actually a system of systems, and then they leave out many things and not remember to put it all together, and then to explain to the person in an understandable way. And then when somebody's labeled with like herniated discs, and then they become the victim like in a long term, most of the time, and then this hinders their movement, and then it's a vicious circle, and it goes on and on and on like that.
Yeah,
And as you said, I sometimes the example with not sleeping well is a very good one, because I mean, I tend to have pretty decent mobility, but when I don't sleep well, I don't lose the range of motion that I already have achieved, because it's a long lasting thing that
Hmm.
I've worked for over the years. But my joints feel kind of like rusty, and not that that it hurts or in any way, but it just doesn't feel right.
Yeah,
So it's a really good example with sleep and other stuff or in your daily life, which people don't take into consideration.
yeah. Absolutely.
Cool. Yeah.
That's where movement quality it comes back to a lot of movement quality. It's very easy to sit to talk to someone about like range of motion. How far can you go into a movement? But the when you look at the best movers, and that obviously depends on the task. But when I think of great movers, I think of like really fluid tennis players or soccer players or sprinters who can really be basically what I think of is coordination and rhythm and efficiency, and yes, maybe power and strength, but those qualities are underpinned by the rhythm and the coordination. And when we're maybe lacking sleep or whatever it might be, our rhythm and coordination is affected, and that might not be very clear on the surface level. You might not see a big difference. Like very good coaches sometimes will see a difference, but like at the level of the nervous system, at the level of the tissue, the intermuscular coordination starts to change, and even small changes will have big effects. Because if you think about someone maybe going for a run and someone hurts or tears an ACL or something like that, like these things are happening within milliseconds. My foot hits the floor and I have milliseconds before something happens. So the reflexes need to be able to kick in quite quickly to protect me. So these are small coordinative changes that we're maybe not able to see, and we think we're absolutely fine, and we think that maybe more stretching or more range of motion is the answer, when often it's movement quality and the coordinative effects that we need to chase. And they're the things that I would define the best movers by, when I see them moving in that rhythmical, explosive um, way, but also in a way that like they're interacting with their environment in a very cool, safe way as well. At the same time, despite what looks like it could be very very dangerous, 99.999% of the time they end up being completely safe, and that's because their body has learned to coordinate those movements so well.
Yeah, I have those stories of posting some videos on Instagram, like with like the inside knee squat and other like ankle stuff loaded, and people have commented that doesn't feel safe and like all that stuff. And I'm like, first of all, like I don't ask anyone to do it, and second of all, I should just show what the body's capable of when like progressively loaded over time in a safe
Hmm.
manner. And this makes like all the difference, like when I go hiking with my family and I'm carrying my baby son like on the rocks, and then if I slip and not hurt my ankle or not drop him in any way, but be able to come back to center in a safe way. So I mean, people tend to forget that most of the time they do training for the sake of training or mobility for the sake of mobility, and they tend to forget that the things we do in the gym or in that controlled environment actually has to serve us for our daily life and not feeling the pain and actually enjoying all the activities outside for most of us, because like I'm not a professional athlete, but I do enjoy hiking, doing all the other activities, and then I
Hmm.
want to be on the safe side. So why not?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we've detached ourselves so much from the environment, like the natural habitat that we've lived on, like even our grandparents, like working on outside more, and like we go from 0 to 100, like we go from sitting 10 hours to like lifting weights or doing like sprinting and other stuff. Like people take sprinting and running for granted, but it's like more complex. And then when they start running, and for them, like having a knee pain while running is something so uncommon. I'm like, yeah, because this and this needs to work in that fashion. So these things need to coordinate. And first, as you said, in on the intermuscular level, and then like extremities and trunk, like most of the people lack that coordination because they don't walk enough. So then there's no arm swings, there's no like coordination between the upper and lower body, which
Hmm.
is critical. So you're absolutely right about coordination, and I think it's part which is heavily missed in training. And so
Yeah.
would you might mostly sagittal or frontal and the poweralized in the transfers, like all the martial arts say it, like all the explosive stuff of athletes do that well. So yeah.
Yeah.
It's the thing, generating power.
Yeah.
Cool. Good start. Good start. I like it. All right. You mentioned briefly that you learn from many people. Would you mind sharing some of your teachers or some of the people who have influenced you the most?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to. I don't want to leave anyone out now. That's the problem. So so someone like people like Ido Portal kind of very much caught my eye, maybe more just 10 years ago or 10 or 12 years ago, where I was very became very very interested in what what he was doing and how he spoke about movement, and he was very charismatic and quite different to what I had seen in the past. I've since learned that maybe like that was probably my first big where I really bought into something. I was like, this guy has all the answers, and I learned so much from him, and I'm quite thankful to someone like Ido. I think he takes a lot of flack in the media or on Instagram these days because he's quite loud about things, or has been in the past, and I think it's kind of unfair in some ways, because I think like he has done a lot of people have been influenced by him directly or indirectly, and he's set them off in their path, and yeah, they might have found different ways, or found better ways, or what they believe to be better ways, but he still probably has influenced a lot of people along the way in the first place. So I'm grateful to people like Guido Portal, people like Charles Poliquin, who was kind of, some of his methods are being kind of brought back into life, and not brought back to life, just being remarketed at the moment by people,
Y-
uh,
yep.
quite substantially remarketed. But he was doing all that stuff, and Ido was doing all that stuff 10 or 15 years ago, like the knees over toes stuff and things like that.
Hmm.
It's pretty incredible for me to see that being remarketed and resold as something new. Um, People like um, Yuri Verkhoshansky, in terms of, he was one of the first people I would have started to look into when it came to learning more about plyometrics. When I was starting to learn about, like, look at Charles Poliquin's way of doing things, and just basically he was one of the main men in strength and conditioning, and then Yuri Verkhoshansky would have been the godfather of plyometrics, I suppose. So those are two big worlds for me, and Ido on the mobility side, and then I fell into some kind of Chinese martial arts and Taoist arts and internal martial arts, and I learned a lot from. I actually learned a ton, probably the most I've learned out of anyone from those guys, that world. Um, and I look back at that stuff, and I actually look at those people, and I see them actually being the best movers in terms of generalists, not specialists, but in terms of generalists, they move the best, in as far as I can see, in terms of longevity, fluid, coordinated movement, being able to move in an efficient way, but also in terms of the negative transfer of training. So a lot of strength and conditioning stuff, you see there's a big negative transfer of training, I would say, which is very rarely talked about, which is a lot of the time sacrificing range of motion at my joints for strength, and sacrificing sometimes fluidity of movement and breathing mechanics and all these different things for strength, which doesn't necessarily have to be the case. But when I look at Chinese martial artists and internal martial artists, I see a lot of strength disguised in a body that doesn't look very strong, because they understand and appreciate the importance of the tendons more than the muscles, I think. Um, and I see them staying very relaxed when they need to be able to be relaxed, and also mindset and how they view the world, and that they tend to not have as many confrontations as people who are maybe drawn to being in the gym and being like, I'm the biggest, strongest guy in the world, and no one is better than me. So that world really opened my eyes, I think, and I'm grateful to that world. And even now I work a lot on the breathing side of things, and I still look back and say, actually, they had all this figured out. They didn't maybe have the biomechanics of it, and here's exactly what's happening, but the practical aspects and the things that I use with so many clients now, they had it all figured out. It was all part of the system. So um, and then there's people like Dave O'Sullivan, who who's an amazing physio, I think. PRI,
Hmm.
Posture Restoration Institute, on the breathing side of it, they're doing unbelievable work. I think they're probably taking a bit of flack as well these days, but because maybe they're not loading people, or getting them strong enough, would be the thought process there. But also, I think people forget that they they learn principles from them. You need to take the principle from them, and when you understand that, you can go and do any amount of squats you want or any amount of deadlifts you want, but you understand the principles of where they're coming from. So I think the PRI world is amazing. Franz Bosch is another one on the more on the performance end of the spectrum, and the coordination that we were speaking about earlier. I think he's doing the best job out there in terms of strength and conditioning, trying to limit the negative transfer of training and trying to get people doing very well on the coordinated side. And then Gary Ward and Anatomy in Motion on the more gentle side. I suppose if I just think about my rehab plans or working with a client, that stuff would come quite early, and I butcher it because I don't use the full gait cycle or the model that he uses. I just take little small things from what I need and uh, mix it up with some other stuff. But I think he's done a brilliant job in kind of mapping out that gait cycle for people who are interested in it. And then there's people like Gary Ward or Gary Gray, who is kind of the godfather, I suppose, of the 3D movement and on getting people like Gary Ward is very specific. This joint should do this exact thing at this exact time. Gary Gray is like, okay, we're going to get people moving in 3 dimensions. And when I reach an arm this way, here's what happens to the knee. And let's just expose them to those movements and get their body moving in all those different ways. And I think that's incredible stuff. And there's so many people that have been influenced by him probably that don't actually know they've been influenced by him. So yeah, there's some of the people. And then there's been loads and different strength and conditioning coaches and basically anything I could get my hands on over the years. So, but for a start for people, they're probably some really good people to check out, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I think to go back to something which you mentioned earlier is about the PRI, and I think when and also this might go for Gary Ward, who's like some of the best teachers I've learned from. So I don't want it to I don't want it to sound in a bad way, but as you said, their approach is a bit gentle, and when I work with people, I also start gently because I don't know the person initially when he starts working with me. So I do the assessment and the exploration, and then for the most part, um, nowadays people lack or clients lack many things, so I'll try to go gentle and then and progressively start adding some of my knowledge from back in the days when I was teaching people with lifting weights and all that stuff. So I try to mix these things, but as you said, I start earlier with the structural stuff, structural integrity, and then I build some strength on top of it. And I think some of the guys who are not interested in Gary and the PRI approaches and principles, it's just because of that, because they don't see the strength component on top, like on top of the foundation of the other stuff. And I
Yeah,
think this gives you a good buffer of strength for solidifying what you've achieved earlier, and then for things not to go back to where they were. So
yeah,
because like I mean, nobody ever said, I mean, I'm too strong, right? Like it's good. People feel nice when they're strong. They're capable of doing stuff, or all the hormonal response and all that stuff.
yeah,
So I think
yeah.
that's about it.
No, I think that's a very good point. I think the other end of the spectrum too is that some of the people that fall into some of those worlds where it's more gentle movement, they make the mistake. In my view, they make the mistake. Not saying that they're wrong and that I'm right, but I think they make the mistake of never progressing people past that work. It's not that you have to forget about that work; you can still do that stuff, but there's a lot of people I think out there at the moment making claims that they helped a client. So my client had knee pain, and he had knee pain for 6 months, and then he came to me and we've been working on this gentle stuff for the last 3 months, and now he no longer has knee pain. And they'll laugh at the previous physio that had that client because they couldn't get them out of knee pain, and look how well I did. But they'll forget to mention that you also that like they're not running anymore. They had knee pain when they were running, and you just kept
Hmm.
doing gentle stuff and told them not to run. So you've just completely detrained them, taken away a lot of their activity levels, and of course they have no pain. But you haven't actually progressed them back to the point where they got pain in the first place. So you have to be careful with working on gentle stuff and making claims that I've helped someone, or was it just the fact that their activity levels went decreased? And I read that's something that gets me very frustrated with people at the moment, because we have to understand that there's more important things than a knee. There's lungs and a heart and mental health and all of these things. And yes, someone might be running and have a little bit of knee pain, but like, if they lose that in their life, they might be sitting on the couch and like might get heart disease, or so we have to try and progress people on to strength and being more and more and more active, and the gentle stuff can assist with that, but it's never going to be enough to get someone it's never going to be enough to rehab someone from an ACL injury and just keep working gently on their foot. They're going to have to start to build up a lot of strength in their quads and their hamstrings and their calves, and work on fast movement and jumping and all of these things. So this is why all these systems I think have massive parts to play, but I think we can't make one of them our gospel, I think, unless of course you just love working in that system and helping people at that time. But also then you shouldn't be making claims that I'm the person that has the answers to everything, because you don't. You're just working on a very specific thing.
Yeah, and then the problem also for me, what that I see is also the person or the system. Sometimes also they get their thinking gets very very confined and dogmatic, and then believe this is the be all and end all,
Yeah.
and then they forget that there's other solutions that work. Just like with dieting, I mean, no one diet works. Like multiple diets might work for losing weight. It doesn't mean that it's going to work for me what works for
Mhm.
you, and so and vice versa. So in regards to systems, I guess the most important thing is getting the principles. But I think the hard part is because there's so much information out there nowadays, and like people are overwhelmed, like and they're the basic knowledge about movement for most people is limited. I mean, I'm not saying it's their fault. It's they're just not specialists. But I keep telling people it's good to start learning stuff about yourself. I mean, I'm sure you're the same way. But myself and my team, we always try to educate as much as we can, so people are self-sustainable and they don't
Mhm.
have to rely on us or any other person. So the more they learn in their 20s, 30s, the better they're gonna move, and the better they're gonna be able to filter the wackos out there who are trying to sell them stuff, and then even whatever fix themselves or get out of pain themselves when they know how to assess and reassess themselves. And so since the level is very low, they will believe anything and they'll want the right answer. So the critical thinking, mixing
Mhm.
things together. This comes on a next level once they actually understand the baselines.
Yeah.
So I believe this is also a part of the problem.
Yeah.
Cool. Assessments. So I'm interested to find out how do you work with brand new clients? So what do you look for in the beginning? Like how does your assessment go like?
Yeah. So everyone has a similar a similar like generic assessment in the beginning, where I obviously get their form and get them to fill out their form and let me know what's going on, and we take into account a lot of I try and take into account like a lot of emotional traumas or physical or non-physical stressors along the way. So like, have you lost your job, or like back when, especially sometime around where your issues started to crop up, was there any stressors around that time? Were you not sleeping well around that time, or whatever it might have been? So very interested in that, and I'm very interested to hear people's story of like what they think is going on, what they've tried in the past, what has worked for them, what maybe hasn't worked, what their lifestyle is like. And then so like that is I think a lot of people do that in their assessment, but they're just asking questions for the sake of asking them rather than actually being genuinely interested, which I think is a massive mistake, because a lot of the time, so many of the clues just lie in that kind of injury history. But an injury history is much more than just, right, did you, like, what injuries did you pick up, but also like what movement habits have you picked up from over the years, and what beliefs have you picked up about your body over the years. Because there might be nothing in the injury history that leads me to believe like someone has back pain because of an injury, but someone might have told them that they can only sit up straight. You shouldn't sit in any other way. And so they're sitting like that with a bold, straight spine for 16 hours of the day. So like these understanding their habits but also their beliefs is very important. If I could only do one thing in an assessment, it would be just have a chat with them, and usually that will lead us to start to play around with movement rather than assessing, going crazy on assessment. Because I think on assessment you actually learn a lot about someone just as you watch them move and as you play around with things. I think you pick up way more than having a really structured assessment. um, so a generic movement assessment usually looks like a toe touch. Then I like to have a look at a toe touch. Very interesting for me to see how their spine actually moves. Not really much to do with how flexible the hamstrings or calves are, but just spine
Yeah,
and
yeah.
rib cage and pelvis. How they shift weight through the feet. I like to look at just a rotation in standing. Rotate your body left and right. Really cool to see internal and external rotation at the hips and the knees, and pronation and supination at the feet. And you'll often see lots of clues then on the standing rotation. People will bring their arms up and really drive the movement left and right from their upper body. And it's kind of like a clue that's like, okay, your pelvis just doesn't rotate at all. You're just driving motion as hard as you can in what should be, it's a high threshold strategy in what should be a relaxed movement. I like to look at a lateral reflection. So just run your right hand down along the side of your right leg, left hand down along the side of your left leg. And you'll see some nice weight shifts from left to right when they do that, and how the spine side bends, and if they can get length kind of through the lateral rib cage and obliques and in the frontal plane. Some things you'll pick up there is that, like, okay, as I slide my hand down along my right leg, all the weight dumps onto my right leg. My pelvis doesn't really shift left. Whereas, for example, and when I slide my hand down along my left leg, all the weight still goes onto my right leg. So you'll see that, like, you have to know what you're looking for here. But like a lot of people will, yes, the spine looks like it can side bend and they can reach a similar spot down along the side of their leg with their hand, but how they've got to that position is not the same on both sides. And that's what we were talking about earlier. It's not often not the amount of motion they get, but how they've spread that motion through the joints and how the system is organized to that. And then I like to look at a squat. Whatever way they want to do a squat, it tells me a massive amount about usually shifts as well. So if you look at a squat from the back, you'll see them sitting down, and then when they go to hit around 90 degrees, you'll see this shift over to one hip or the other, and that starts to tell you a bit about if they're lacking maybe internal or external rotation on one of the hips. They're trying to avoid that motion. And you'll also see then, obviously, in a squat, you'll see some nice what's happening with dorsiflexion, um, what's happening with hip flexion, hip extension, and how well they can actually keep their body stacked. And a squat pretty much is one of the best ways to understand how well someone actually breathes, because if they can't breathe very well, pelvic diaphragm and the thoracic diaphragms can't really stack on top of each other. There is very little chance of them being able to get down into a nice deep squat in an organized way without doing funny things with the knees and the feet. So that's now, unless they've kind of stretched their life away, like not in a smart manner, and really just loosen the hips to the in a way that's just, which you will see in yoga. People, let's be honest, some of the time, like, they can get down there, but it's, I would rather they weren't able to get down there at that point. So that's some of our generic one. And then depending on it might be shoulders or neck, I'll look at just some basic shoulder movements and basic neck movements. And then I'll look at some range of motion on the table. So just generic passive range of motion at the hips, and adduction and abduction will be a big one, shoulder internal and external rotation. And then I'll always look at some breathing as well, just so that's one of the main ones. If I could only look at 2 or 3 things, I'd look at them lying on their back with their knees bent, asking them to do some breaths for me and see where it expands and where it doesn't, and how much of their neck they're using to breathe. And I'd look at it, probably a squat, and then I'd probably look at a toe touch, and maybe a toe touch to a squat, where they actually go hands down and then they sit into a squat from there. So they're probably my main generic ones, unless someone has a very specific problem and they need to hone in on a specific joint.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much what you just described as an assessment is similar to what I look for in the beginning as well. Maybe it's structured in a different way, top down, bottom up. It doesn't matter. But
Hmm.
those are the basic human movements through the upper body and the lower body, and what certain parts of the body should be able to do, tolerate weight and stuff. All the shifts through the feet when you forward bend, and all the strategies the body is using to complete the tasks. And I keep telling people that the brain likes victory, so it would use whatever strategy that it needs to achieve in order to complete the movement. So, like as you said, I'm not also impressed with the range of motion, but I'm impressed with quality. And then if you have the quality and still achieve the range, I'm totally fine with that. Because
Hmm.
like for the most part, end range stuff is like training or overdoing on the ligaments, on the tendons and ligament side, without actually improving the range of motion. I mean, that's for the general people, the population of people who are actually doing it without actually understanding it. Because training
Hmm.
the end range, if you have the knowledge of, let's say, Andrea Spina, I mean, that's a different story. But then all
Hmm.
the followers who are like the gospel followers or the dogmatics, who are only using that system, sometimes if they don't understand, I mean, that might, in the long run, it might actually hurt people rather than help them. So
Yeah.
integrating that into like a full spectrum movement, it's what's important. Because as my previous guest Lucas said, if you're trained on the floor and do like all the crazy like internal external rotation stuff, but you're not able to squat like under a barbell, for example, I mean, what good does it serve you? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
and it's important, yeah.
Yeah.
So squats and stuff. Uh, Great stuff. Yeah, and actually, I have a question about your as part of your assessment. Because like, I since I also work a lot of with the nervous system and the eyes and the breath and all that, all those kind of things. I mean, most of my clients come by referral. I'm guessing it's the same way with you. But how do people comply with? How do you get people to comply? Is it like pretty straightforward for them? Do they embrace the ideas or the assessment right away, or they look at you funny? Because like probably most people, most colleagues of yours wouldn't ask them those questions and wouldn't look at those movements and strategies.
Yeah. Mostly now, I think mostly I very rarely get a funny look anymore. Very rarely. That's probably because what you're saying, like most people are coming from referral or word of mouth, or like they've seen a little bit of stuff on Instagram, and there's a little bit of trust built up even before we've done the session, I suppose. But in the past, yeah, they might have looked at me a little bit funny, but I think I do understand that people get that, and I for whatever reason, I think I never got too much of that, and I think maybe it's just because I was quite comfortable in my own skin with how I was just asking those questions, and just being honest, and like just looking at movements, and not trying to be saying like this is definitely the answer or this has to be the way, but I'm just interested to know and interested to find out, and I'm very open with my clients with that, like that. Today, like a lot of the time I say on the assessment, a lot of the, especially the online assessment, I say today is much more about me than you. I just want to find out more about you, and the more I can find out, now not finding out information for the sake of it, like your little toe does this when you X, Y, and Z. I don't really care about that. Like there's, unless you have a little toe problem, but there's so many big elephants in the room usually that you can clean up before you need to get into the minutia. And I just want to find out what the big elephants are, and like if is the ribs something that needs to be cleaned up, is the pelvis, is the visual system. Very rarely I find that is the case, but like it's sometimes it's worth checking out. Is the and like surely it makes sense that another big elephant would be like, are you able to sleep? Like, are you absolutely stressed? And like you just, you maybe you don't need any specific movements. Maybe you just need to be told, look, you're going to be okay. Like I just need you to, let's work on some things that just help you to relax a little bit, and I think it's probably about how you put it and how people put it, and when people feel like you're just being honest with them and not trying to be fancy or make it about, like it's the assessment is about me finding out about them, not me trying to be cool or different for
Of
the sake of being different. So I probably got more of that in the past, but I think some trust has been built up now for the most part. But if someone does refer, if someone is, I can kind of know if someone has been forced to do a session, like someone's mom or dad has got, they've got their child to do a session or vice versa, then there will be a little bit of a different kind of feeling with the session. So, but for the most part, I don't get that anymore.
Yeah, and something another which something different which you mentioned, apart from most probably colleagues of ours when they do an assessment, that those questions about the mental and psychological part, because I do also notice that I can sense if the person's mentality, the way they enter the door, that comes from experience. So I know how to approach them and what strategies to start working with them first. If it's going to be more like breathing and gentle stuff, or if it's
Yeah,
going to be more like hard stuff or whatever, even into the assessment, and for me to win their trust in the beginning. So although they already come from referral from a
hmm,
few people, anyways, but how do you is it the breathing that you use mostly for that mental and psychological part? Because we're not psychologists and we don't work with emotions per se. So is
yeah,
it the breathing that you use for the most part to deal with that? And how to get people to comply with that? Because people come to you as a movement professional and not somebody dealing with emotions and stuff, although we
yeah.
know it's all related.
Yeah, yeah, good question. Really good question. It does depend on the person. Like so, how do I deal with that the most? I think finding a plan for someone. So empathy is the first part. So just having some empathy towards their situation where they are and showing an understanding of that. Not saying I have all the answers, but I empathize with where you are at the moment, and I'm going to try my best to help you out. I think that, like, when you kind of get that across to someone, it's a massive sigh of relief already. And a lot of the time, people come to me that are very, very frustrated because they've tried a lot of other things and they don't think that, like, they've lost hope. So the first thing is just is giving someone hope, and showing them that there's an understanding, and there's hopefully a path out of this for them. That takes such a weight off people's shoulders straight away. So we're not psychologists or anything like that, but we have to be careful because I've spoken on Instagram about like us, the importance of our words, and some people have said, well, you're not a psychologist, how can you even approach that? And I'll say, well, okay, if I'm not aware of how I'm speaking to someone, my words can have a very damaging effect. So I would rather use words that is going to build someone up and pick them up, and help them, give them hope rather than damaging them. So whether we like it or not, we are psychologists because our words are coming from a place of authority and having a massive impact on someone. So I don't use the breathing stuff too much for that. I will, like, I think the breathing stuff is amazing because it's going to start to hit some of that stuff regardless. So once they learn to relax and get the ribs to move, it is going to they are going to feel this relief or relaxation, and letting go of stress. And yoga and all these other systems have known that for thousands of years. So that's definitely not a secret there. So I just like to frame that in a way of, okay, when you look or feel how stiff this joint is, and then when we do this breathing, look how that improves. So I will always frame it in a way of like a biomechanics way, unless I need to help them understand that, okay, like when you're very, very stressed, you'll feel how this area completely stiffens up, and now your movement has to come from somewhere else, and like maybe your lower back gets overworked because your middle and upper back can't actually move very well. So I will always try and make it understandable and not woo woo, but usually my words are the best way. And the best way, I think, of getting someone to, like, of helping someone who feels like that, is giving them a plan and saying, look, here's how we're going to approach it. First, we're going to work on some of this stuff. The next session, we're going to progress you on to here. And I understand where you want to get back to, which is get back to playing golf or whatever. And here's the steps we're going to take. And here's where we are at the moment. And here's why I think you ended up where you are at the moment. And that's because of sloppy training or poor recovery, or maybe mental health or whatever. All these things have a role to play in it. So as soon as you give someone a plan, they go home. They skip out of the door once they think, okay, we have a plan here, and this is not a perfect plan, but it's something that I think is going to guide us along the way, even though we'll tweak it all the time.
Yeah, I mean, having the plan is, I think, the crucial part because whenever a new client comes and then when he goes home, like before he goes home after at the end of the session, myself and all my colleagues would actually recommend just like sometimes even a couple of things that they start doing on a regular basis. And oftentimes people are like, "Should we do something more?" And I'm like, no, start with these two things. Explore and check how the body readjusts, and let's start sensing new things in your body. Because I mean, most people are disconnected, and if you're not able to feel certain areas of your body for your nervous system, it doesn't exist. So it's going to stiffen things up. And then, as you said, oftentimes people will think that the hamstrings are the issue when they're doing a toe touch, and actually the lumbar spine, which is not able to flex, and
Hmm.
then it's more of like a protective mechanism because those big chunks of meat are actually helping your spine not to break, for example, and
Yeah.
and stuff like that. And when I give people that perspective, they're like, huh, I never thought about this in such way.
Yeah.
And then for me, like 100% of the people, like this would be the case when people have lower back pain, when they have like herniation, which they're dealing with, and oftentimes they've been told not to flex that part of the spine. And I'm like, all right, let's start progressively load it, and then at the end of the day, once they learn to control it, it all goes away. So
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
again, explaining is a crucial part, I guess,
Yeah.
for having compliance with clients, and at the end of the day, getting results. And like breathing, as you said, and meditation and stuff like that, I actually have one of my older clients. He no longer trains with me, but he's been doing meditations for the last couple of years. And then he said that the more he does the meditations and the breathing part, the better his mobility becomes. And I'm like, yeah, because you're distressing. Like, because like
Hmm.
if you're stressed out all the time, and apparently it's not going to loosen things up.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So that's it. Just helping them understand your words. I think the more simple you can keep things, but also having to relate it back to their story and their situation. So like simple, relatable explanations that are also a plan towards where we want to get to. Like if you can give anyone that on the first session and on every session, where like an update. This session we worked on this. Great job, really well done. I really like what we've done there. So we're giving them a little bit of compliment and a confidence booster. Next session, we're going to work on this. If only if you do your homework and you nail this stuff, then we'll be able to get to here. And if we can continue to take them little bite-sized chunks in each session and work and just chip away, we stay motivated, we stay like progressing, and they understand that, okay, even if I have a little bit of pain or regression or a couple of days that have gone bad, it's not the end of the world. It's just life. It goes up and down, but in general we're moving in the right direction all of the time. And most people, no, most people I've ever met, when you put that in simple terms for them, they'll eat it up. They absolutely love it. And I actually get referrals before they've even gone home, and before they've even like got back home, they've rang their friend, or before they've gotten any pain relief or anything like that, they're referring someone because for the first time they have a plan that says, oh, like we actually, like, I have some hope here. This actually may, the words they always use is, this makes sense. And a lot of the treatments that people get along the way, it doesn't really make sense to them. They might get a rub and feel good, but it doesn't make sense, and they don't have a plan. They'll just go back the next week and they get the same rub. So once they have a plan, and it makes sense to them, people, that's where our psychology stuff comes in. Like that's what people are missing, I think.
Yeah, it's funny because yesterday I had a new client again, a referral again, and she came and she's been through like visiting multiple doctors and like being on an appointments regularly, spent thousands of money of dollars of her own money, and then we did some work. At the end of the day, she or the session, she felt super amazing, and she actually was able to sense the differences. And she's been doing yoga and like hiking and preparing for like Kilimanjaro, but she had to cancel that because she had knee problems,
Mm-hmm.
and her knee was giving up. And then at the end of the session, she was like, we were discussing about the next visit, and she's like, let me check my calendar. And even like half an hour later, I'm sure she wasn't already back home or at work, and she's like, is it okay to give you a number to a friend of mine who's like having this and this pain? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Why not?
Yeah, yeah. So it's good for
So
business too. Everyone wins, you know. And but it's being honest. That's all it is. Just being honest and honest, but always having that sprinkle of hope with people. And that's like people love that. They appreciate
yeah,
that.
yeah, having a win during that session, and always trying to explain the connections, because sometimes people will come with like an elbow pain, and I'm like,
Hmm.
all right, I don't care about the elbow right now. Let's look at other stuff. Like, because I personally always work from the ground up, so
Hmm.
always look at the feet and then go every single joint up, and then check all the movements that you already mentioned before. And
Hmm.
then we're not touching the elbow, not working anything in the upper body, doing the lower body stuff only. At the end of the day, like, my elbow feels perfect. And then at first it's like the voodoo magic, and then I start explaining the connections, the gait cycle, whatever, all the stuff, and then they understand, and then it makes sense.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
definitely.
absolutely.
Cool. We've been talking about others, but like, I wanted to ask you about your, because I haven't seen your personal training. What is it like? Do you like lifting weights? Do you like running or some other activities?
I like playing sport. That's my main thing. So we've two sports in Ireland: Gaelic football and hurling. So two different sports. People can YouTube them, but Gaelic football is like a mix between Australian rules football and soccer. Like we can catch the ball there's a round ball. So that's what I enjoy. I don't enjoy lifting weights too much. But I do understand the necessity of it sometimes when there's just tissues that you need to condition and stuff like that. So you don't see much of my training because my Instagram is trying to promote my clients as much as possible and my like some of my ideas and stuff like that. And I try and I think it's always more powerful for someone to see me coaching someone else through something than for them to just see me doing something, you know. So at the moment we're back after COVID and we're training I think 3 days a week, and that involves a lot of running and a lot of DOMs. And I was actually
Hmm.
saying to my girlfriend this morning that I put on some weight over COVID because I got a bit lazy and business got so crazy. And
Hmm.
after the first few training sessions, I said this morning that even my fat had DOMs in it. I think after some of the training sessions. So yeah, running and playing sport is my big thing. And then after that, it's like I've tried every type of training, and it's just what makes me feel good. Sometimes I just prefer going for a little walk and just appreciating the outdoors or a hike or something like that than going crazy on the lifting. But I know it's needed. I need to do more of it.
Yeah, yeah, completely understand. And yeah, as you said, it's like what you enjoy, and like what you mentioned earlier, not telling the person not to do the activity that they like just because they're having the pain. But I'm like, we always try to coach or to tell them not to work or to train like around pain, and not getting to that threshold where like the pain starts to
Hmm.
resurface. So if running 5 kilometers is too much, run three, but still do stuff like, but don't bypass and and just try not fix the issue, like, because a lot, this is like squatting with elevated heels. Like, yeah, I mean, it's fine, you can do squat, but why would you want to do this all your life and not fix the problems which are not allowing you to do that? and
Hmm.
and I guess this is important thing for people to understand, because they enjoy the activity so much. So I think they believe that doing these kind of things are taking time away. And since they're already way too busy, they think that they're regressing away, because those are slow paced, very focused
Yeah.
movements. And I think partially, like as you said, I try to keep a healthy mix between sharing our achievements and our movement and our training, like myself and the team, and
Hmm.
success stories from clients. Because, for example, we're in a niche where like we do like gymnastics stuff, splits, handstands, and stuff, and
Yeah.
people are impressed by that. But when they look probably some of the exercises that you do, and like ourselves as well nowadays, pretty boring, and people wouldn't understand the principle behind it, and there's going to be like no engagement and interaction whatsoever. Like I
Yeah.
remember in the beginning, before I took the, actually it was in Dublin when I took the FRC course back in 2017. I was looking at like all the main instructors doing it on Instagram and internet, didn't quite understand like what are those faces and all that, like the tension and all that stuff, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't understand. I'm guessing the people are the same way in the beginning when they look at online.
Yeah,
So
definitely. When I was doing a lot more gymnastics, I posted a lot more stuff of me doing gymnastics, of doing handstands and stuff like that, because it was cooler and it was easy on the eye. So definitely I can understand that. But yeah, hopefully I don't know. I can't get a video of me playing sport or anything like that at the moment. So yeah, just well, I'm trying to do my gym here, which I'm in, is nearly finished, and my clinic is nearly finished, which we renovated, and trying to get a track outside and stuff like that. So like just working on more plyometric stuff and ideas around that. I think that can be very cool for people to see, and like that's where we're going to be working a lot on next, because I haven't showed enough people, or probably showed enough of what I do in that kind of end stage rehab, and I think a lot of people are interested in that, and we're hopefully going to have some courses around that. So getting people back to running and showing like, okay, we can progress all the way through the stages, from the very, very early stage rehab to back to performance and performing better than we ever have before. And like, here's some of the things along the way. And just on your point with the running stuff like that, or the people are playing sport and they don't want to maybe regress back to other things. Like, again, I think that comes back to explanation, where it's like, and that's where in some of my programs and stuff, people see I think they like the running specific exercises, where we strengthen people in running specific movements and positions, and it makes sense to them that, like, oh yeah, I'm maybe I can't run that much at the moment, or whatever, I can do a little bit, but I'm still preparing my body in some way for those demands. And yeah, I can work on the gentle stuff, I can work on running specific strength, I can work on some kind of almost everyone can use some kind of plyometric or jumping variation, even if they have like, no, I won't say the worst Achilles pain, but like most people can have some kind of reactive strength or reactive plyometric in their program along the way. And it just makes sense. Like, look, we're going to start here and build it all the way back up to you sprinting, but we're getting specific from the very start. And that's I think people love that stuff. They love to see, yeah, when you just point it out to them, can you see how when you're lying on your back in that position and you're working your hamstring in that position, if I flipped you up, it would look like you're running. And as soon as you say that, they're like, yeah, this is amazing. So like, just little explanations, little details that don't have to be complicated, but that changes the buy-in so much, I think.
yeah, and sometimes I do the same thing as you said, like laying on their back, they're working the hamstring, and then I show them the position like with the
Hmm.
torso, the head, and the torso on top of the leg into like a pronation mechanics, like through the gait cycle. And I'm like, does it look the same? Like, yeah, it just works different parts. Like one loads more of the front and decelerates, and the other one was more the strength component of the posterior chain and all that stuff. And once they understand, they're like, it's no longer the boring exercise.
Yeah,
And that
exactly. It means
off
something to them. Yeah, exactly.
yeah, yeah, and oftentimes it's like even those boring exercises, even today I had a talk with a client, and I'm like, if you're not able to control your breath, if you're too wobbly, if you're compensating using your arms and trunk to do a single step up, it means that it's hard for you neurologically. I don't care if you feel that you're super strong. I mean, unless you're able to do it like super consistently, like having a conversation, and even like sometimes closing your eyes
Hmm.
from like a step this tall, I mean, you're not ready to progress about something heavier. Or you might do it. I mean, I'm not against you trying, experimenting, but for the purposes of your goal, I mean, it's not good in the long term, because you bypass, you skip the basics, and then at one point you're gonna stall, and you're gonna get stuck, or you're gonna get injured, and then you're gonna wonder why I'm training so hard but
Hmm.
I got injured. So
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree with that. You watch the
Long
nervous
term
system,
thinking.
yeah, you watch the nervous system learn in front of your eyes, and like it doesn't matter how much maybe a barbell you put on your back and how much weight you put on your back when you ask someone to do a coordinated movement and they can't put it together. Like, I think that's where the easy gains are in the beginning, because I think we should chase coordination. And when I talk about coordination, sometimes people think I mean like standing on a Bosu ball and hitting flashing lights. It's not. It's joint
Yeah.
coordination, it's muscular coordination, and interlimb coordination, things like that. And like the nervous system learns that, picks, relearns that stuff because it's there, it's embedded there. They just kind of forgot it or lost it for whatever reason, and it picks that stuff up and it makes people feel so good so quickly. And that's the stuff that I stress so early with people. It's easy. It's actually so, I think it's so easy to plug strength in on top of that. But when we miss that stuff and we chase strength very early, more often than not, we have to end up going back and trying to get that stuff. And I think our gains, strength is easy. Strength is just understanding progressive overload and being consistent.
Yep.
Whereas coordination, like it's also easy. It's just understanding position and joint motion and the attractors of human movement. But the nervous system soaks that stuff up. It learns so quickly.
Yeah, and like people consider strength only for the most part by being able to lift or move a certain weight, and I'm like, there are different ways to challenge yourself, like varying the tempo, doing more reps and changing the tweaking the exercise just slightly, because sometimes I'll have like uh, people who are used to squatting with their feet out, they wouldn't be able to squat properly with their feet parallel. And then if some coaches or postural exercise trainers keep having them with the parallel feet, I'll sometimes tweak it and have them like internally rotated femurs, and I have asked them to squat and they're not able to do it. And I'm like, I want you to be able to do everything, like, and feel
Hmm.
safe in the various positions. Like, quote from Ido Portal is like, there's no wrong movement. There is like unprepared body for the certain movement.
Yeah.
And like I'm like, don't get stuck. Like that's why if you're I know yoga teachers. I have a client who's a yoga teacher, but she's not dogmatic. She trains with weights. She comes to me. She learns from other people, and she applies that with her clients. And they're like, some of them are like, huh, this doesn't look like yoga. What is it? And like she's like, movement. Like it's
Yeah.
really hard to confine it into a box and explain what it is. It's a mixture of many things which actually work for this specific individual.
Yeah. Sounds like a good teacher.
Yeah. And last question, what, like, in terms of like principles and movement and breathing and whatever you feel it's important for people to do, what would be, like, let's say, three things which people should like start with, like first exploring, checking on in the beginning, and then working on to getting better at?
Ooh, that's a big question. Is this any any
Yeah.
per- any person?
Any person from the very beginner even to the more advanced.
Okay. Um,
Baselines.
Okay, cool. So for anyone, I think like breathing is an easy win usually. So hopefully we all breathe, and hopefully none of us are not breathing anymore, or you wouldn't be listening to this podcast. So I think that's an easy win. So if you're taking 21 or 2,000 breaths a day, if each breath was a little better than it was last week, without putting much effort into it, like 5 minutes a day, then I think that's a big win in terms of sleep, in terms of how your joints move, how your spine feels, in terms of even probably things like digestion, relaxation, like loads of different things, who knows what. But I think that's something easy to work on. So I think the best way to work on that probably is in a more passive way. Excuse me, in a more passive way, which would be just sitting down, lying down, standing, whatever, and just taking an inhale and an exhale through your nose. And that's hopefully how we should breathe throughout the day. So the easiest win, actually, I should say, for anyone is, if you're a mouth breather, try and train yourself to be breathing through your nose. like the biggest win anyone could ever get would be that, I would say. So that's number one. And then if you feel like that's easy for you, it will be more of a like get into a position, maybe lying or seated. It doesn't really matter, and then just think about doing an inhale through your nose and then a long exhale out of your mouth, and just getting rid of that air, pausing and then taking another inhale, and just working on that for a couple of minutes a day. But I will caveat to that is the exhale, I believe, only counts if your ribs are actually moving and not this like weird isometric contraction of the abdominals where nothing is moving and but you're just blowing and you're like your head is going to explode. That doesn't count. So you should be able to feel your ribs actually moving, and you can use your hands for feedback on that. That would be number one. Number two would be walking, and that would be, I'm not going to talk about the specifics of biomechanics or anything like that. With walking, I think the easiest win there would be getting out every day. Hopefully, like I know a lot of people live in cities and stuff like that, but getting out somewhere where there is maybe a little bit of nature around. It doesn't have to be a forest or anything like that, but just somewhere where your visual system has a chance to actually open up and appreciate the periphery. And I would say there's three things with walking, maybe three things. One is that peripheral vision, and that just being out in nature and appreciating sounds and smells and different colors and stuff like that. I can't really get into the details of why that's so important for your entire body and how you move, but it is. People would just have to trust me on that. Um, and the second thing with walking is making sure that you're not looking down too much. So obviously we won't need to look down, but like just try and have your eyes on the horizon and appreciate the world around you. It is an eye thing as well, but it's also a neck thing and a breathing thing and a spine thing. And then the third one, and all of these kind of go together with walking, is making sure your arms are swinging. And that does not mean trying to swing your arms. It means bringing your awareness and feeling, and hopefully feeling that your arms have a little small chance to actually swing. And if they're not, that is another sign of very poor breathing mechanics, because when arms swing, chests pump, and left chest and right chest get a chance to pump against each other. And when you see someone that can't arm swing, you're seeing someone that actually can't get any expansion into the chest walls. So that's why points one, breathing, and points two, walking, are probably the two most important things. And when you break down walking, I think arm swing is the most important thing. But that doesn't mean, and the visual system, that doesn't mean I go and just swing my arms and train arm swing. It just means if I don't have any arm swing whatsoever, or a lot of people will swing their left arm and they won't really swing their right arm, it just means that there's something to be looked at there. And when you start to feel that arm swing come back, it'd be like ecstasy. Your body feels amazing. There's so much free energy and like motion being driven into the spine and down into the hips with that. So that would be the second one. And the third one then would be, what would the third one be? The third one would be, I don't know, explore your movement, have some kind of little assessment, or like maybe not assessment. I don't like the word assessment, but some kind of rhythmical movement, or like a little bit of a dance, or some kind of movement that I go to every day. It doesn't have to be the same every day, but a little check in with my body every day just to see how I feel, and get some things moving. And that practice, I suppose, could be a little bit different for everyone. That could be someone else, someone going for a walk themselves, someone going for a little run. Maybe one person has a yoga class, maybe someone else has a Pilates class, maybe someone goes to the gym. But hopefully something where there's a little bit of awareness around my movement, I think, and enjoyment, that's hugely important. So for anyone, I think most people can find a practice that they can hopefully stick to, that doesn't take that much time, that they enjoy, and maybe their heart rate gets up a little bit, and they just get a chance to get out of their heads, get out of their office, get out of their phone, and just enjoy what their body has to offer. And not worry too much about the pain in my knee or anything. Just try and move with no thoughts or feelings around it, and no like hopefully no labels attached to it, and just feel what I can feel on that given day. So they're probably my three big ones.
Awesome. Awesome. And your last three also resonate a lot with what I like to and what I share with my clients as well. I mean, understand it or not initially, but as you said, we don't go to. I mean, if we go too deep into each of the three, I mean, 1 hour is not going to be enough for each. But as you said, it's good that they trust us and start exploring, because then when they come back, they actually have some feedback, and then the conversation begins. In the beginning, it's just us like telling them and asking for their trust, and then once they spend some time with themselves, they get that feedback, and then it's, I mean, everything gets better from there.
Yep. Yep.
Amazing, David. It was a great hour and 10 minutes, and I really enjoyed our talk. Very casual, a lot of insights and a lot of useful tips for people. Many perspective shifts for probably the most of our clients or listeners in that regard. So I will share all of your information in the notes. I'll let you know when it's ready, so you can also reshare it. Uh, if you have any final words, now it's the time, I guess.
I don't have too much. No, I'll just say thank you very much for having me on, and I know you're doing some great work over there. So that's great to see you always, and I appreciate you the work you're doing with your clients and with everyone else, and the good word that you're spreading. So thank you very much, and hopefully the listeners enjoyed it, and I didn't ramble on too much.
Thank you once again.